Good morning, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a good day and God bless you. Alright, let's get right into the news here because there's quite to cover on this Monday. And to cover up is in 100% full mode from the mainstream media along with the Pelosi regarding the 2:30 a.m. ROM that Paul Pelosi was having with some intruder inside this house. And we continue to find more and more evidence suggesting otherwise of what actually took place there, as the mainstream media is trying their best to control it. And now that they have lost control of Twitter, they are losing their minds over there and not be able to gaslight Americans and ask him some simple questions like where's the security footage? Where are the body cams from the officer? And why? How was it a person able to get onto the property of the third person in line to the presidency so easily? Right, lots of questions to be asked there. And of course found this article and we're gonna dive into it in just a moment. Well, we know Paul Pelosi is not a stranger to being hammered touring this year because he was pulled over recently with a DUI. He was hammered coming back from a party. And here we found that he was hammered again. Maybe more ways than one, right? Let's take a look at this article here. IT security cameras are everywhere. Attorney Hard meet Dillon on the security into Pelosi neighborhood. One main question still unresolved is how did David the Pepe break into the Pelosi his house and not get caught? We asked this yesterday, said that the Gateway pundit and says if an individual broke into the home of the Speaker of the House of U.S. Representatives, 3 surely is a surveillance system that would tell the police and numerous entities that the house had been broken into. There's no doubt that the Pelosi home has a security system. The system likely includes motion detectors as well. Any movement near the house or broken glass would immediately be registered by a surveillance company. They in turn would notify the police of the encounter. Also, there are likely police cars circling neighborhood where the Pelosi is live. But the police reported that Paul Pelosi made the call to the police. Paul Pelosi never shared that the home was broken into. There are also questions about that event being a burglar to Pepe reportedly forced an entry into the rear door, but a video from yesterday shows that the glass was on the outside of the home. On the stairs behind the house, if a window is broken from the outside, wanting to glass on the floor be on the inside of the house. Yes, it would break into entering. The breaking and entering argument doesn't hold water. On Friday, attorney Harman Dillon Hurt shared her thoughts on the security of where the Pelosi home is located. These are consistent with what we are saying. She says my firm served a lawsuit against Paul Pelosi one time in San Francisco for attempting to serve at the other residence, Napa, Georgetown. They weren't home, but the staff were and multiple law enforcement officers were on the perimeter. Break-in is odd given the level of security. We have been to many social events in the immediate vicinity as well. There are security cameras everywhere, and many homes have private security. Whatever happened, law enforcement should have plenty of evidence to get to the bottom and find the attackers. And what is quite curious and why many of us doubt the story that has been given to us by the mainstream media narrative is that none of the mainstream media outlets are demanding to see the security footage. They're not even raising the question that there could be a possible other motive other than then trying to still run with it being that MAGA disgruntled individual, which has already been to boot. Already, the students had left-wing lunatic, and I'm sure he was just getting his rocks off with Paul Pelosi, and maybe that romp went bad. There's a lot of theories that we covered over on the Last American podcast on Saturday night about this whole incident. And it doesn't add up, and Pelosi are in full cover-up mode. As we speak, they're scrubbing the airnet with articles pertaining to this. Elon Musk even sat there and sent out a fat check against Hillary Clinton and LeBron James earlier today about this whole scenario playing out the way it has. Again, I don't believe what the mainstream media say. I mean, there is way more to this story. Pelosi being gay, more than likely, and maybe it was a ritual that went bad, and that was another theory out there that do realize that he was going to be sacrificed, and he didn't want to be sacrificed by these old people. And then, this is some big news, Democrats have literally nothing heading into the election. And so clearly their thought process here is quickly let's politicize this attack on Nancy Pelosi. His husband, Paul Pelosi, tried to make it all about Republicans and all about Donald Trump. Oh, how intense the hypocrisy is on this one, folks. The lies, the narrative building, nuance just doesn't exist anymore. Something like this happens. And of course, nobody's looking into the actual details into what's really going on. Immediately cue in the narrative more right-wing extremism? Well, as you might expect, it's a whole load of BS. And let me show you guys exactly what I mean by that as we cover this Paul Pelosi incident fairly from a totally neutral perspective, because clearly the media won't. Alright, folks. So let's lay out all of the details. So far, Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi, his husband was assaulted by apparently a crazed man allegedly in his underwear, and we have a lot of details so far. In fact, we have the actual dispatch phone call where I guess we can assume that Paul Pelosi himself called the San Francisco Police Department, and as you guys can hear from this police recording, apparently Paul Pelosi referred to the individual, the assailant David de Pepe, if I'm not mistaken, or rather David de Papa, he referred to him as a friend. The dispatch officers seem to clearly confused here, and so they sent a couple squad cars for a welfare check at the Pelosi residence. That's the first confusing bit, frankly. This whole situation seems totally confusing. When police arrived, from what we understand, both men were in their underwear, both holding a hammer, and as the police arrived not before the individual, David DePapa apparently went after Paul Pelosi, grabbed his hammer, and then proceeded to assault him. We're going to start off very clearly by saying here that indiscriminate acts of violence against anyone, and public figures included, are never justified and should be condemned totally. We will never do it, the left is, and celebrate acts of violence. And so we wish Pelosi a speedy recovery here, and we will never do what Christine Pelosi did, Nancy Pelosi, as daughter, celebrating the assault of politicians, or politicians' family members because they happen to hold. We all remember Christine Pelosi, Rand Paul's neighbor, was right, tweet horse. But moving on here, we have absolutely no idea what happened. That Pelosi is home to men in their underwear wielding hammers. Paul Pelosi apparently getting a bathroom break during the incident. Read this from Politico. Paul Pelosi was able to dial 911 himself after telling the intruder he had to go use the bathroom, and then calling from there where his phone had been charging, according to a person familiar with the situation. The fact that Paul Pelosi referred to the individual as a quote friend and even knew him by his first name, calling him David, but at the same time saying he didn't know him, there's no sign of a break in. The only sign that we have so far is this photo of the back of the Pelosi residence, where you can see a broken window was shattered window, but the glass seems to have shattered on the outside. So it was broken from within. It's quite confusing, to say the least. The point that I'm trying to make with all of these confusing and contradicting elements is that we have absolutely no idea what happened here. But of course that will never stop leftists, who are clearly going to view this moment as a last-minute fluke October surprise where they can politicize it, and claim that the individual must have been a right-wing MAGA extremist, who must have been acting on behalf of Donald Trump. Joe Biden says attack on Pelosi. His husband echoes January 6. Blames Republicans suspect an assault of Pelosi. His home had posted about QA on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez raids last year. A GOP congressman shared a depiction of himself ending "Me were murdered." Okay. When the House rose to censure, GOP leader defended him. By the way, what she's referring to there, I believe, is what Paul Gosar posted, which was an anime meme of him being the hero protagonist character in the wildly popular anime Attack on Titan. It was clearly a joke. It was a cartoon, but anyways, let's move on. As the drama queen continues, yesterday, a man sharing that members' rhetoric tried to assassinate the speaker and her spouse, and so as you guys can see, the weaponization, the politicization immediately starts with some totally disingenuous takes. AOC's take, of course, takes the cake in that regard, but the idea here is, as we see from the Associated Press, the suspect in assault that Pelosi is home, and posted about queuing on, and they go on and on about how he's a right-wing conspiracy theorist. Well, not exactly. The New York Post goes into detail. Paul Pelosi hammer attack suspect David de Pepe is linked to conspiracy blogs. To Pat Baby's name is tied to two conspiracy blogs. One, titled Big Brother Censorship Hell, features a banner warning readers that the elite/ruling class never censor themselves. You can still turn on any mainstream news channel to hear day and night the narrative put forth by the people who rule you. Although the posts written under the username David DePapa are mostly blank, they feature bizarre headlines including "Word that we cannot use normalization and communist voodoo science." So posts written under the username David DePapa are mostly blank, yet the Associated Press is associating these conspiracy theories with David DePapa and alleging that he's a right-wing QAnon conspiracy theorist. It's an outright lie. At least we have absolutely no evidence to suggest that, and even if that was the case, that he was some deranged conspiracy theorist nuts. It doesn't necessarily suggest that he's somehow a Trump supporter. There is zero evidence to suggest that this individual is a conservative right-winger whose attack was motivated by right-wing conspiracy theories, and based on what we know right now about David de Pepe. He's apparently a nudist activist which the media is unwilling to run with. Probably because San Francisco nudist activists probably isn't exactly what you'd immediately associate with a conservative, and he apparently made hemp jewelry as his little side hustle. Leftists are immediately jumping to conclusions and trying to score cheap political points here. But what we really understand about this situation, what is absolutely clear and undeniable, is that the situation is weird, doesn't really make much sense. We need much more information. And what it really seems like happened here is that Paul Pelosi was assaulted by a crazed, mentally ill homeless nudist in San Francisco. That's more of the narrative or the headline that I would go with, not to mention in the sanctuary city of San Francisco, the individual David Depop is apparently an illegal migrant protected from deportation by the sanctuary city status of San Francisco. It's yet again another crazy story in San Francisco of a crazed individual committing an act of violence. And we see the left working overtime to craft this narrative that it somehow has something to do with January 6th, or Paul Ghosts, or Donald Trump, or right-wing extremism. And that is an outright lie. I'm pretty sure most conservatives don't have an issue immediately condemning the act of violence itself. But the idea that this event will be falsely attributed to conservatism and that all of a sudden conservatives have to go on the record condemning this act of violence in through that frame is completely ridiculous, especially coming from the side that cheered on Rand Paul's assault that landed him in the hospital. Everyone listen to this. Today on the incident that left Senator Rand Paul with 6 broken ribs. This might be one of my favorite stories, although of course we don't want to. Clearly Senator Paul is still struggling. Paul's neighbor Rene Boucher is accused of beating the Senate. That's MSNBC saying this might be one of my favorite stories. We cover Nancy Pelosi, his daughter Christine Pelosi, as tweet earlier, and we all remember when a crazed Bernie Sanders supporting leftist literally shot Steve Scalise at a congressional baseball game, and now that's the party that wants to falsely attribute the situation to the GOP and lecture you want extreme rhetoric and calls to violence. Give me a break. It's a last-ditch desperate narrative effort, and of course, it's going to fall flat and it's not going to work. Ladies and gentlemen, give me your thoughts below. And hit subscribe right now. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you for watching the video.